Okay, welcome to part 3, the final part for lesson 18, Ready Lesson 18 for 7th grade. We're going to be reading the second article to part 4, and then we'll be going over the questions. So, the second article says Water for the World. And the study buddy says this next passage also deals with desalination. I wonder how the focus of this one will differ. I'll look for key information as I read. So, water for the world. The essential ingredients for life are food, water, and shelter. Water, of course, is especially important. Not only do we need to drink it to survive, but we also need it to water our crops and take care of our livestock, both of which are primary food sources. Without a ready supply of clean, fresh water, however, these needs cannot be met. As the number of people in our world continues to grow, meeting everyone's water requirements becomes more and more challenging. How can this be, though, if most of Earth's surface is water? Although 70% of Earth is covered in water, only a small fraction of that total is fresh water safe for human use. This amount appears even smaller when considering that the population has tripled over the last 100 years or so, and our use has increased sixfold. Not only are there more people, but they're using more water than in the past. In some areas, the supply is dwindling while the demand continues to grow. Given our limited fresh water resources and increased water needs, we must turn to other means of providing adequate water supplies to the 1.1 billion people who currently do not have access to clean, safe water. One popular solution for some areas experience water stress or an imbalance between water use and resources is desalination. The process manufactures fresh water from seawater. Desalination, or the removal of salt from salt water through reverse osmosis, is not a new idea. The Greeks and Romans were doing it thousands of years ago, one pot full of water at a time. Luckily, technology has made the task easier. As of 2009, there were more than 1,400 desalination plants around the world, producing more than 15 billion gallons of usable water per day. Despite our progress in making desalination a viable solution to the water crisis, we still have a long road ahead. Countries must continue to work toward building more desalination plants to keep up with the growing need for fresh water. Only then will our water resources become as limitless as the sea. So let's look at the close reading. It says, underline any information in this passage that is the same or similar to facts presented in some simple water science. So I'm going to take my underline tool, and I notice in the first paragraph it says not only do we need to drink it to survive, but we also need to water our crops. This is some very similar information from the previous article. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to underline this part right here. Now I notice in the second paragraph it says that 70% of the earth is covered in water, but only a fraction of it is fresh water. Now the other article had talked about how only 2.5% of is fresh water, and that 70% of the Earth's surface is water. So this is very similar information from that first article that we read. And actually, I should put it all the way to human use. And in paragraph 3 at the bottom, it says the process manufactures fresh water from seawater. So the first article did talk about desalination, and it did discuss what it was. So this is similar information. And in paragraph 4, it also gives another definition of what desalination is, especially when it comes to speaking about reverse osmosis. So that's definitely what the previous article had talked about. So these are things that I would underline. Now it says, how is the discussion of desalination different than the passage? And then put a star next to any facts about desalination that were not present in the previous text. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my star tool. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller so it fits. And they want us to put a star next to any facts about desalination that were not present in the previous text. So here I actually know that this right here is kind of new information as well. Although they are discussing the process, the fact that it's manufactured is a little bit of new information to me. And the one popular solution of the Greeks doing it was also new information. So this right here, where the Greeks and Romans were doing it one pot of water at a time, that's new information. And also, what's new information is that there were so many 1,400 desalination plants that are currently producing today. That's new information as well. So So this is some different information that we've received in this second paragraph that we would be able to use to compare and contrast how these texts differ. So now let's move on to the questions. So the first question says, which sentence best sums up how the focus of the first passage differs from the second passage? A says the first passage describes the growing demands for fresh water, while the second describes the current limit to water resources. Well, this actually is not that correct, because both passages describe the limit of water resources. B says the first passage stresses the scarcity of fresh water, while the second explains how salt can be removed from seawater. This is not really correct because that's really only discussed in the first passage. The second was not even mentioned. C says the first passage presents the pros and cons of desalination, while the second argues that desalination is the solution to water problems. Well, the first passage does not present pros and cons, so this is not true. And D says the first passage describes the desalination process, while the second discusses how desalination can help solve the water crisis. This is correct, actually. The first text informs, and the second explains the solution to the crisis. So that's why D would be the best choice. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take my circle tool, and I'm going to circle D. Okay, number 2. Which of the following explains how the two authors shape their presentations by using similar key information in different ways? So A says both authors talk about how people need water to survive, but the second explains what will happen if water needs aren't met. Well, this is not really the best choice. In stating that both authors talk about how people need water to survive, it's incorrect. That's not really what the articles were discussing. Let's see. B says both authors name reverse osmosis as a key part of desalination, but the first explains the science principles used in the process. Okay, this is actually perfect. Yeah, in the first article, reverse osmosis is discussed heavily, specifically with the process. And the second article does mention reverse osmosis as well, so B would be a really good answer. C says both authors explain that 1.1 billion people don't have clean salt-free water, but the second uses the facts to support desalination. This is incorrect because the first passage doesn't include the fact about 1.1 billion people at all, so that's not true. D says both authors say that only a small percent of Earth's water is fresh, but the first discusses the challenges of finding water resources. Well, D is incorrect in stating that the first passage discusses the challenges, because it does not. So in this case, our best answer choice would be B. And then finally, number 3, compare the presentations about desalination in the two passages. Explain how they are alike and different. Describe how the authors use similar and different facts to achieve their unique purposes, using at least 2 details from the text in your response. So here is an example response. Both passages discuss the importance of desalination as a way to increase our supply of drinkable fresh water. However, some simple water science uses facts about desalination to explain the science behind the process, while Water for the World uses facts about water scarcity, population growth, and desalination itself to suggest that we need to increase the number of desalination plants to help solve the water problem. Okay, I made a couple of mistakes here. Let me go ahead and fix them all. Okay, so there you go. Go ahead and pause the video to type out your response. And once you're done with that, you're going to go ahead and you're going to move on and read From Big Fish in Troubled Waters and Protecting the Oceans One Choice at a Time, and answer the following questions on pages 187 and 188. Okay? So this has been Ready Lesson 18 for 7th grade, parts 1 through 3. Hopefully now you understand a little bit better how to compare and contrast text.